Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 2:02. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Ben Howdige. I'm the Vice Chair of the COC. Welcome. Glad to see some members of the public here. We're going to start with introductions, and then we will do roll call. Why don't we start over here to my left?
Far left, right?
Far left.
Karen Spiegel.
Matt Chang.
All right, Dr. Charles Lee Johnson.
Dr. Ben Howdige.
Anise Smith.
Angelina Ko. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Karen Roper.
Danielle Johnson.
Welcome. I'm going to pass it over to Zuli to do roll call.
Good afternoon. I'm going to call your name, if you could just say here or present. Lieutenant Hutchinson. Supervisor Karen Spiegel. Here. Dr. Ben Howdige.
Here.
Dr. Matthew Chang. Here. Daryl Fry. Here. Dr. Kendrick Davis. Bill Blankenship. Leticia De Lara. Dr. Charles Lee Johnson.
Present.
Angelina Ko.
Present.
Linda Barak. Carol Alba. Anise Smith.
Present.
Danielle Johnson.
Present.
And Karen Roper.
Excited to be here, especially here where all these amazing decisions happen by the Board of Supervisors. Do so much for our residents.
Thank you, and we have established quorum.
Thank you, Zuli. Next agenda item is consent items. We have the minutes to approve from February 20th. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll make a second. Angelina.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Zuli, can you do roll call, please?
Yes. Supervisor Karen Spiegel. Dr. Ben Howdige.
I'm abstaining.
Dr. Matthew Chang.
Abstain.
Daryl Fry.
Approved.
Dr. Charles Lee Johnson.
Abstain.
Angelina Ko.
Approve.
Anise Smith.
Approve.
Danielle Johnson.
Approved.
And Karen Roper.
A yes vote.
Thank you.
Question, is there enough for approval passing those minutes? If not, I did have a proxy here, so I could approve with my proxies.
Yes, it passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public are encouraged to address the board on any item not listed on the agenda. Each public comment request email will be read aloud. Zuli, did we receive any public comments via email?
No.
Okay. And are there any? Oh, welcome. Come on up.
I've never been here before, so I'm supposed to go here.
Right.
In the center.
Okay.
Well,
Welcome.
hello. My name is Tommy Clinton. I'm with the Transgender Health and Wellness Center, and I believe I just found out we're on the agenda today. I just found out today at noon about this, so I apologize for my dress attire. I'm trying to stay colorful. I just want to clarify a few things when you're making your decision. There's been a misunderstanding or a misconception that we're not willing to give patient ID numbers of individuals that are not within the continuum of care to verify revenue for payment of someone. That is incorrect and false. And I do have the email where we have followed up with our conversation stating we could do it, but we'd have to take the last three off so it's not identifiable, and we would keep a second copy at the office if you ever want to check it to verify anything. One of our problems that we have being the Transgender Health and Wellness Center, as you know, we're underneath a serious eradication right now with the federal government. So anything that's really identifiable that can be sent to the federal government, we're very cautious about. In Texas right now, they are actually doing a roster on trans people to track them. And part of the Project 2025 is to put us in camps. So we take this type of thing very seriously. From my understanding, it was stated that we were refusing to give the patient ID number at all, and that is not true. I will leave this for you. A couple other things I wanted to point out to you. Last year, we ran 210%. We actually did a project where we took an extra $100,000, attached it, and on that additional $100,000, we were able to maximize and double our percentage. So I think at this opportunity is maybe that someone needs to pay attention to what we're doing, and we can use that skill for other individuals and double our production. So I think that's something we should really think about before you make your decision. And then this year, we're already at 140, and we just started. So there's been another complaint made by the department that we have gotten rid of certain people and sent them back to homelessness. What has been left out of that is that they had revenue. One had about $1,800 a month. Another one is running a nail salon out of her home. And they're refusing to show us any type of revenue, so of course we can't continue to pay for those things. And one of the situations that we had, she, I guess, called the office and was complaining. We actually offered to find her a smaller place that she could afford. She refused it. And so we want to make sure that you understand that as well. I'm not sure where our problem is with this department, but it has been an ongoing problem, and I think some of it is cultural competency. I know we're a very complicated group of people, and I don't expect everyone to understand us. But I do think that there's a level of cultural competency that is missing that we really need to work on. And I think that another issue that's viable to the county is I think there needs to be an upgrade on HIPAA education. In a debate somewhat with the department, I said, right now you're an Easter egg basket of HIPAA violations, welcoming Easter. But we have to be very cautious about how we decide to use people's information in these different times. We at no time have wanted to discontinue it. The only time that we have put it on hold was when we were approached and said, okay, we want you to go retroactive and give us all these patient ID numbers, even the ones that are not associated with the DV program. And I said, we can't do that. Okay, and they said, well, then we're not going to pay you. I said, well, if you're not going to pay us, we can't continue to dish out $40,000 a month. So we sent a letter out to the individuals, and that's another thing that was brought up to me, saying that we specifically told them not to work with the COC, and that is absolutely incorrect. I signed the letter myself. I specifically told them, I said, look, we have a discrepancy here. I think it's really important that until this is resolved, you go to this person, it's the case manager, and deal with that directly right now and get your rent, because we're trying to resolve these things. So that was the issue we did. We didn't tell them. We did tell them what the reason was, because we thought it was viable, and we thought it was very important that the clients to know that there may be a discrepancy or a bump in their rent.
I'm so sorry. Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business, we have the, oh, so sorry, other public comment. Come on up, please. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Elaine Sanders. I am a newly housed individual. I was unhoused in the city of Riverside for 6 years up until I became a program, part of the Rapid Rehousing Program through the H-Hope Behavioral Health portion of your guys' funding. I just wanted to start off with my experiences so far with the program. Since I started with the program, I've had many challenges and many issues, I guess, with communication with the staff. My initial support for documentation, for getting my ID, my birth certificate, my social security card was non-existent. They told me they could not drive me out of the county to go get my birth certificate. They went for free, and then they would not help me pay for it as well. I mean, I lived in the river bottom. I was volunteering at an organization. I wasn't actually on payroll yet, but I was working, so to speak. I've had multiple case managers, multiple meaning more than 5, since I started this 3 years ago. I started this process 3 years ago, and I just got into my apartment last June. There's been lack of communication from the caseworkers. I've had retaliation, targeting, when I've tried to vocalize my needs and my rights, going to city council meetings last year or a couple years ago and things of that nature. I've had judgment and discrimination by my peer support specialist, who is now my new case manager, where she told me that I should not let anybody in my house that looks homeless or come around my apartment that looks homeless, because that draws attention from the apartment complex. And also, all of my paperwork was incomplete or filled out incorrectly. I just got that corrected recently with my VI SPDAT. I think the VI SPDAT is not an accurate portray of people's experiences, because people are going to tell you what they think you want to hear, and also what's going to get them the best result. So I think that you guys could have benefited from taking somebody like me and helping. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more? Public comment? Welcome.
Test. My name's Jeff Green. I am Associate Director of Inland Equity Community Land Trust, and we are the convener of the IE Tenants Union. We've been called out to Las Palmas apartment on Palm Street here in Riverside many times to help fight many evictions. It looks like to me there's a pattern with the apartment manager or the owners there of cycling people through the H-Hope program and then evicting them 4 to 6 months later on nuisance evictions. I know I've helped many people file their answers to their evictions out of that apartment complex, and I'm just urging you to take a closer look at the people running Las Palmas and who you're partnering with in this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Abigail Stevens. I don't speak as well as these guys, obviously, but I just want to share my experience with living at Las Palmas Apartments. I was there for about almost 2 years, and like everybody else, you can see them going through the cycle. You know, they rent the apartments and they have them out. I have fallen behind my apartments. As you can tell, I'm in a wheelchair. It may not never walk again, but these people haven't came in with any order, you know, to tell me about, you know, maybe I'm sorry, or, you know, what can we do to help, or nothing. They just evicted me, so I think it was retaliation, but I just want to share my experience with you guys because I know they're doing the wrong things. I just hope nobody else has to go through that, you know. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Come on up. By the way, if you'd like to speak, address one of the items on the agenda, you're welcome to speak now or wait until that agenda item is spoken of. It's up to you.
Hi, my name is Vicki Williams, and I am an advocate for the homeless. I've been homeless, and my son is homeless, so I advocate for him and everybody else. I just want to say that the program that the city has set up for the homeless is not corresponding what really goes on. out with the actual situation with the homeless people. And I think that's the problem. That needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Yeah. Sure, come on up.
Here.
Yes.
So my name is Jocelyn Kenney. I work at the Transgender Health and Wellness Center, and I know there was another point of contention that we did want to address, which was that our mental health program was seeing other people outside of the program. First off, I'd like to point out that this has been on our website since the program's inception, so it wasn't anything we were trying to hide. And secondly, I know there was some concern about the claim of 40 hours a week spent on this. They were stating that one person wouldn't be spending all their time on that if they were seeing other people. The thing to consider is that they actually do have 2 people working in that position, basically. You have Van and then an assistant, Marika, and that Van has an autoimmune issue and deals with not being able to go outside by working ungodly hours. I don't know how they do it, but they're working at least 80 hours a week, so the claim of 40 hours not being exceeded would be incorrect, and I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your time listening to us today. My name is Audrey. I'm an outreach worker, and so I have a lot of experience working with very vulnerable populations, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what people are experiencing out there, but also about what a lack of funding for very vulnerable populations does. When we take money away from programs that specifically cater to extremely vulnerable populations, that is going to result in harm, death, homelessness, all of the things we're trying to avoid and prevent in these spaces. And so I think being very mindful about where our funding goes and making sure that people who have lived experience and who are sharing those experiences with you are taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. That is 4.0 new business. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Tanya Torno. And there will be an action needed after her presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board of Governance members and all of our Continuum of Care members, our partners who are joining us today, both in person and virtually. I wanted to make a quick note that items 4.1 and 4.2 are in some ways similar. We'll start with 4.1 specifically, and for the record, I will provide a summary of the recommendation that we are making. At this time, our department is recommending modification in the grant terms of our HUD Continuum of Care Rapid Rehousing Agreement, which provides rental assistance to survivors of domestic violence who are experiencing homelessness. This grant is part of a number of grants that we receive and provides direct assistance to individuals who are referred through various street outreach teams and homeless service providers who all participate within our continuum of care and utilize our coordinated entry system to ensure that as individuals are engaged for services, that there is an assessment that they undergo to determine the best viable course of action. And so our hope is always that we are creating and developing programs, implementing programs that really help us serve all individuals and allows us to do that, of course, in an equitable way. So again, just to stress, the program that is being reviewed is one that provides rental assistance to domestic violence victims and was part of a large domestic violence bonus grant that we, the Continuum of Care, and this board approved for us to move forward with, and we were very, very excited when that came into fruition a few years ago. The specific recommendation today is that we modify the terms of the agreement with Transgender Health and Wellness from the proposed period of performance of February 1st, 2025 through January 31st, 2026, to a maximum term of February 1st, 2025 through April 30th, 2025. That means following this meeting, if the board approves, Transgender Health and Wellness would be provided with more than 30 days notice to work with our team to transition individuals served from this program to another qualified vendor. Again, our goal here is not to discontinue services, to make sure that we facilitate a smooth transition for the 20 households that this project serves. There is a second part of this motion that would include requesting this program, again beginning May 1st, to a new qualified vendor who applied under the same bid application, which is His Daughter's House. His Daughter's House has administered other similar grants serving domestic violence victims and has done so well, and and has confirmed their ability to take on this program moving forward. I want to emphasize that this action is necessary, given that there have been significant challenges with the current agency's ability to comply with terms of the agreement. And again, I want to make sure that it is noted that we have every intent, as we have done for the course of the year, to work closely with both agencies to facilitate a smooth transition, to ensure that as we're nearing for not only April rents to be paid, but that also we have a good plan for May and future rents to be paid to landlords who have agreed to rent to our participants throughout the day of the program. Of course, the fiscal component is one. What's also critical is making sure that client care and case management services continue. And so that will be a key element of the transition process, to make sure that we are working with both agencies and specifically His Daughter's House to ensure that they have full knowledge of each client case plan and can make sure to work with each client to continue any progress or connections to services that may have already been in place, and of course facilitate any new linkages that need to happen. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause here and see if the board has any questions or comments.
I do.
Yes, Karen?
Thank you. So a couple of comments and questions. First of all, thank you to the organizations and people that came and provided feedback. I know it's been the intention of this board and also Housing and Workforce Solutions to be as inclusive as absolutely possible to serve all people. And as I understand the requirements of the grant, it is that we have to serve all victims of domestic violence, everybody. So I just wanted to emphasize that we need to make sure we're in compliance with HUD requirements, if I'm understanding what you're saying, Tanya. And then with respect to HIPAA, I believe HUD has set forth very strict protocols in HMIS regarding domestic violence victims. I know there are special reporting requirements that are even different for them. I know you could speak to it running a domestic violence organization, so I know from my understanding you guys have been in full compliance with what HUD requires, Tanya, and maybe you can speak to a little bit of that. But I know that the real issue is we are mandated by HUD, if I understand what you're saying, to serve all victims of domestic violence. The term of the agreement, I know it looks like it's a transition to 3 months for Transgender Health and Wellness. For his daughter's house, would the term remain through January of '26? So that's the existing term, so it's, that money's just gonna go on top of the existing contract for the same term. So their term is not changing, his daughter's house, right?
I want to make sure I understand the question.
Would their contract expire, his daughter's house, January?
It would expire January 31st, 2026.
Okay, yeah. Okay, can you speak a little bit more about the intricacies of HIPAA compliance regarding domestic violence and HMIS? Because I know it's very strict.
So yes, I will speak to our requirements with HUD, which require us every year to go and work with this board and our larger continuum of care to evaluate performance of every project, and then also renew grant agreements with each of our subrecipients, which spell out the specific terms and requirements for each agency, each subrecipient that agrees to carry out these services. And so you're right that through this criteria, we have very specific requirements that that require us to report client-level data to HUD. And we do that through the use of our Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS. And there are very specific client disclosures that our agencies use, which also includes a shared agreement between all of our agencies. And before a client's information can be entered in HMIS, the client must confirm and say, right, they must give their consent, essentially. Because HUD recognizes that there are very specific cases, particularly with victims of domestic violence, where it may not be safe to do so, and they may be reluctant to enter their data. There are alternative reporting requirements that we can support, which includes the use of an alternative data system that will provide HUD, again, with the basic data elements, usually client name, date of birth, race, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, and their relationship, if it's a head of household with multiple members, the report usually indicates the relation between each head of household member. So as long as the agency can demonstrate that the alternative system that they're using can produce their data, then we can move forward with funding them as a subrecipient. It's also important to note that these same standards have been in place for a number of years, and they have not changed. And so for this particular agency, when we look at transgender health and wellness, they are now entering their third year with us, and so the specific grant terms in their agreement have not changed. This was a requirement in the beginning, and to our understanding, to our knowledge, is something that they were willing to comply with until only recently.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Tanya, for that information. I do just want to start and say that the Trans Health and Wellness Center does provide a number of extremely important services out in the desert, us being in the Coachella Valley. It's very important, the work that they do in providing the support and the housing, mental health services, drop-in center for a very vulnerable community. And so we're grateful for that, and we've seen over the years all that you all have done. And as well, I personally have worked along with Tanya, Greg, and Rashana and others, here in the county, grants, different nonprofits over a decade now. And so I do understand, having been on the other side of managing a grant, that sometimes issues do come up. And so there will be times where it is necessary to say, okay, we need some technical assistance. Or they reach out and say, well, you need some technical assistance. And so I guess my first question is, and I'll also add that on more than one occasion, Roshana has come out and spent all day in the desert to help us resolve any issues that we had so that we can move forward collaboratively as the nonprofit and as the county. And so my question, I do have a few, would be, when did you all become aware of these concerns? Or how long has this been something that you were taking note of?
So I want to emphasize a point that Anise made in that I want to say about 2 years ago, we really amped up our efforts and really at the direction of this board and our COC and even the subrecipients themselves, the number of technical assistance calls that we have to each subrecipient. So at a minimum on a monthly basis, we are meeting with every agency that we fund, and we use those meetings to talk through and work through challenges and even opportunities, and even when appropriate, acknowledge wins or strengths that a program has. I say at a minimum because too often, very often, our teams will work with each agency to increase these calls. And so sometimes we're meeting with agencies twice a month. And again, whether that's our request or their request, and only the point to highlight that we meet really, really regularly. In regards to when the concerns or when we started noticing concerns with the program, I will say that, again, this is the agency's third year carrying out these projects, and we have had we've identified a number of issues related to their performance from the beginning, and we have worked with them to rectify those. In regards to the most recent ones, we have had a number of meetings and conversations since last year, beginning in June 2024, where we specifically started to talk to them about their client files and documents missing or information not being entered in HMIS. Most recently, in the last 4 to 6 weeks, has been where the concern has lied regarding the supporting documentation. So even though I will say this is, in addition to the technical assistance calls, every month, because these grants are on a cost reimbursement basis, when we are reviewing claims from the agency, we often identify that there is supporting documentation missing, which restricts our ability to make a payment. And so those specific issues have been part of frequent interactions, both verbally and in email between our agency and Transgender Health and Wellness.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. And were any of those meetings, the technical assistance, were any of those like an on-site? Because I just recall in the past that would be something that would be done, an on-site file review visit.
So in August, we did an on-site.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Good afternoon.
So in August, we did a monitoring with the agency, and with that monitoring, there were some concerns then with the program compliance, and we had 6 findings and 4 concerns at that point. During that monitoring, they were aware of those findings for the fiscal and programmatic related issues.
Thank you, Roshana. All right, I'm getting there. And as far as, and you did touch on this, Tanya, but all the efforts that have been made, between yourselves and Trans Health and Wellness to kind of address this issue and bridge the gap, has there been, because we're talking about, they were approved for funding and now it's going to be removed. That's what we're talking about here. And so we heard earlier public comment, and so I know this is not a decision, or something that would be offered lightly. So I guess I'm curious what efforts towards mediation or some kind of, to bring in a party to help kind of, because it sounds like, and of course we always have to be concerned, right, because we're using public funds here, about making sure that the requirements are met so that the organization is in compliance and also that you all are in compliance with HUD requirements. But it seems here, and at least the way it plays to me is somewhat of a large miscommunication or a breakdown of communication, and so I'm just wondering what efforts have been taken since all of the instances you noted and the on-site visiting, what has been done to try to rectify this with Trans Health and Wellness Center?
So we have, as I mentioned, we have facilitated a series of meetings with the agency, both virtually and as well as have had a series of communications electronically by email in an effort to try to resolve these issues and really as part of a good faith effort to try to resolve these issues before it got to this point. I think ultimately we are here today because we have had little resolution, and where we had hoped that some of these things could have been turned around rather quickly, and we could have gotten, as an example, the supporting documentation we needed to move these costs forward, right? We haven't. And so at this point, we are really looking at this from the perspective of what's best, both in large part for the clients that are being served through the project, to make sure that, again, first and foremost, they don't experience any disruptions in their service, and they can continue to trust, both trust the services and the continuum that we have built together to ensure that they get the services that they need to resolve and continue to resolve their homelessness and maintain their housing. But then secondly, I think ultimately we recognize the important role that we jointly play as the Riverside County Continuum of Care, where ultimately if one project or one of our subrecipients is not in compliance, that really puts all of our different projects and the full amount of funding that we receive from HUD at risk. Because again, when HUD is evaluating our performance, they aren't just looking at performance from a very narrow lens or one specific project. They are measuring our performance across the board. And so for that reason, it is really important that we have projects that commit to serving all, that have very clear processes for how clients are served and, importantly, discharged, and that the fiscal piece is really important, that all of any payments rendered towards the project are eligible and appropriate. So ultimately we are here today because we believe those two main things are in jeopardy.
I just want to add, so I do have the dates. So in June of 2024, our fiscal team met with the agency to provide training to discuss some of the fiscal issues. And then on August 13th, the staff was provided with a client mock file and provided training so that they know what all entails that goes into the files. So we have provided extensive training for this organization, specifically in person on August 13th and on June 7th, and another fiscal training on November 21st of 2024.
All right, and thank you, Rashawn. And just one last question: how much money is left? If you said it, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it, or I missed it, and I don't see it here. on this grant?
Yeah, so we are still in the process of reviewing the claims that we have received from Transgender Health and Wellness, and part of our difficulty in being able to answer that question is because we're still trying to collect the needed backup documentation to determine which costs are eligible and which may not be eligible. But please note, and I want to make sure that this is understood, that part of our responsibility will be making sure that we do make the agency whole for any eligible costs that have been incurred to the program, and that only any remaining funds would then be transferred over to the new agency taking over the project. So that will be part of the transition process and part of our working together with both agencies.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. And that's it for me with questions. I'll just say that this is definitely, for me, hence my many questions, a bit of a tough one, especially because, again, of the important service that you all provide. And I know it's not something, again, that's taken lightly to, take back or end a grant that has already been approved, especially with a partner organization that we have been working with and that has done good work. But I do hope, and I appreciate you answering that question, and it seems that from your point of view, all efforts to address this issue have been taken, mediation and otherwise. So thank you.
Can I make one more comment? I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
Just if perhaps it might be helpful, because we do know the extreme value of the services that are provided by the organization, that there's some kind of a collaboration between his daughter's house, right, and Transgender Wellness and Health Center, so that their clients that are victims of domestic violence, that there's a seamless transition so that those clients are still supported, might be helpful.
I was just going to share that, yes, we would definitely support a continued partnership between both agencies for the very reasons, Karen, that you noted, and which are really key and are a central part of our mission, in that we want to make sure that we continue to create multiple access points, right? We often talk about how we need to have as many partners as we can at the table, not because we have the resources to fund them all, though we wish we get to that point, but because we recognize that there are individuals that may access other specific points and others not for different varying reasons. And so we absolutely support a continued partnership with Transgender Health and Wellness and look forward to being able to facilitate such a partnership with his daughter's house.
Angela?
Thank you. In light of everything, as a DV provider, as someone who is part of the DV collaborative with Transgender Health and Wellness, I think I need to recluse myself from a vote. However, in having spoken to Tanya about this, I can comment as a DV provider. I believe the collaboration will continue. Because the DV Collaborative is a separate entity, and we are all working together to support domestic violence survivors in making sure they're housed, especially in the Coachella Valley, because there's so few of us out there providing these services, and we have a very lengthy list, and the services provided by Transgender Health and Wellness are invaluable to our community. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your comments. This is DV bonus money. This is not money we're guaranteed to come in. So I want to put that out there as well. If it's not about dollars and cents and performance, but with HUD it is. And these are individuals and these are families and people that really need the wraparound support. And I would hope the collaboration will continue regardless of what the decision is made, where the funding goes. I know the monitoring happened and there was some findings and different things. And so there's always a timetable for that response, and I don't know if I missed it, Was that timetable not met? Was the response not provided? Because I know we've had it from our monitoring, and it gives you very specific bullet points and timelines. And I think that might be important, not to dig so deeply into it, but we need to, because this is a lot of money that affects a lot of individuals that are very vulnerable in our community, and it impacts multiple agencies. And that's why I'm reclusing myself, but I do want to put it out there. And as a DV provider, we have a standalone similar HMIS system that we've been using for multitude of years that makes sure our reporting complies with HIPAA and our DV regulations, federal requirements, and what is needed by the COC. And we've never had that issue. We know how to deduct files and provide that information, and we shared that with the COC and how important it was. And that's why we have our own standalone, but we can run the reports as well and make sure that we're included without outing our clients, per se, for lack of a better term. So there is that. It was quite expensive, and we still pay for it. We still make sure we have our licenses. We still comply with reporting, because it's important that our clients and all those survivors are counted in our community. So I wanted to put that out there, but I did want to know if I missed it, because I didn't write it down, or I was too busy writing down something else. With the monitoring and the findings, what was the timeline? Did they have 30 days? Did they have 90 days? Did they not meet that deadline? And if they didn't meet that deadline and you knew they had 90, 60, 30 days, 120 days, then that right there is writing on the wall. So I just wanted to put that out there as food for thought, and I'm going to stop, and thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could kind of piggyback on that, I'm going to give up on working this because I'm not talented. Oh, the hell? No, that's all right. No, hey, look at, no, I got it worked out. Thank you. It works. It works. I just don't know how to work the technologies. Tanya, if you could, and to piggyback on those comments about timelines, I know that during this conversation, we had public comment about things that were said were done or not done. Some information here, HMIS, the HIPAA piece. Could you, as you're able to, go through the list of concerns with us as you're able to? I know there's a conversation about 4 areas of concern, 6 findings, or vice versa, but I think kind of combining our two comments, if you could go through the issues, please, as well as the timelines for if it's a corrective action plan or remediation, or whatever terminology that is used, so we can fully understand this issue.
Yes. So first, I will start off with reviewing the main concerns that have been reviewed and discussed between our agency and Transgender Health and Wellness. And I'll start off with the first that was mentioned, is that we had a number of clients who received little to no notice that they would be losing their housing assistance. That was combined with calls also from former staff with the agency who reported that they also were receiving a number of calls from former clients who, again, were provided with no notice and really had little support or knowledge on what to do next. Two, there were a number of occasions where the agency indicated that they only wanted to serve or felt that they were best to serve transgender individuals and wanted to transfer any non-transgender individuals to other projects. To that, we clarified that, again, our agreement with HUD is to ensure that any victim of domestic violence is assisted, and so given that that is written in our agreement, we would not be able to move forward with such a recommendation. We have also most recently, and this one I talked about, have had concerns regarding the claims that are received and not having the appropriate documentation to be able to confirm which costs are eligible and uneligible, which again is another major concern because we cannot draw down the funding from HUD until we have confirmed that we have conducted that full review. And then also there have been most recently a series of communications where the agency has requested to terminate the project and has directed staff, there was even a letter, that have directed clients, and they even sent out a letter to their clients indicating that they would no longer be operating the program and directing them to contact our office for assistance. That item in particular, or that letter that was sent out, was only made or brought to our knowledge through, I believe it was a staff member who forwarded that on to us because of their deep concern about the little notice that clients would receive when their rents were already past due. So those are the main concerns. And in regards to the timeline, I'll speak to the monitoring visit that we conducted last year on August 19th, which identified a total of 6 findings, and we provided the agency with up to 30 days to provide us with a corrective action plan. We did receive that corrective action plan. Again, the plan that was laid out was agreeable, but as has been noted, the challenge has been that while we have received consent, sometimes both verbally and in writing, the issues have been ongoing and have been part of regular communications, both as part of the monthly technical assistance calls that we facilitate, which include our HMIS data team, our fiscal team, our program team, in addition to special meetings that we have hosted with various members from our teams to talk through these issues.
So I just want to speak to this, that one, thankful for all partners. We were excited when this money came through. I can remember just as a board the excitement that was there, and for this agency upon the funding and the approval here. So wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand a lack of support for the general population that is served by Transgender Health and Wellness, or for the organization that does amazing work, certainly advocates and educates all of us on how to serve better, period. Sad that it's come to this place. And the flip side of that is that I know that this board has held Housing and Workforce Solutions responsible for making sure that technical assistance is provided, and that we are being good partners to those who are receiving funds. So I know that we don't arrive at any place or any decision lightly. We've always been advocates, particularly for smaller organizations or organizations that serve special populations. Has been something that's important, and I always make sure that at every meeting that I'm speaking into that space. To me, it sounds what we have here is sort of a compliance issue. And when it comes to compliance with the other business entities that I work with, there's a lot that could be at jeopardy by not being in compliance. Even if it's one partner, it's the fact that it could affect all of the funds that are being received and many other clients outside of the individual agency that are being served. And so on my end, while I heard the public comment that was made on a political climate that is very anti, and that's very true. There's a political climate that has been very anti the unique population that's served by Transgender Health and Wellness. Certainly that's not the sentiment here. That's not the expression of this board or the thinking of anyone that sits in these positions. Certainly it is to look out for the health and wellness of everyone throughout the county, to make sure that we can continue to receive funds and to give them to partners to do amazing work. And so I wanted to lift that up because when the microphones are off and we're not behind these stands, there's some great conversations cheerleading and supporting the organizations that are out there, including this very organization that we're discussing right now. So it's with humility and it's with love when decisions are being made, but just looking at the whole picture of what may benefit everyone around. So just wanted to share that those are important things to look at because we all also live within a climate where all these funds are on the block. And if we're not good stewards of them, it could disappear for everyone.
Are there any other board comments?
I was just going to, as you wound it up, you said the words I wanted to say, and that is, working in public dollars with the county, we jeopardize not just one organization, but it could be jeopardizing more. And so your words were right on point for what I was saying. And if there was efforts made, I have to trust that the efforts were good faith efforts and that we are stewards of not just this one, but it's all of them. And we want to make sure that we are in good graces with those that are putting us in charge of the decision-making of the funds and making sure that we continue to have that positive relationship so that we can continue to serve all of Riverside County.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other board comments before we allow public comment? See no board comments. Any public comments on this item? Yes, please. Come on up.
Hello again. So that was quite damaging, so I apologize for that. But I think that a lot of things that were said, I think, need to have a little bit more context added to them. So what I would suggest is that we maybe do something where I can speak, because some of the things that are being said, that's part of it, but it's not the full amount of what's going on. For instance, many times we've asked for help, we have received it, or we've received something late, like we did last year, and they said, oh, here's a document you're supposed to use. We weren't even informed of it as a brand new organization. So I think that those type of conversations are something that maybe that we need to have before we make a decision, because I can tell you my population is not going to go to daughter's house. They're not culturally competent, they don't feel safe, they want to have their own kind. So they'll go back to the streets, they'll go back to sex work, paying for their hotel rooms, and that's what they'll do. So I think that we should really think about that before you do it. And also I was informed that our funding for our youth program to deal with our homeless and human trafficking of LGBTQ youth is on the chopping block as well. So I think that some of this is just frustration because, for instance, HMIS is not what we're talking about. We're talking about Office Ally, which is a medical software system. It's separate from HMIS. I can't share that if people are talking and I can only get 2 minutes to do that. That's different. That's a different HIPAA situation. And that's really the context of the squeaky wheel here, is that they want the full number, and we said we could redact the 3 off. There's an email there confirming it. The county did not. See what I mean? So I think it's best that maybe there's a longer hearing and there's conversations that happen, because I don't feel that this is fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? I just want to say I appreciate when I first walked in and saw public here, lots of folks from the public. I appreciate the public attendance because that means we're going to have a conversation and discussion. I appreciate the discussion, that the questions, the making sure that that we know and understand what's going on and that we're making the right decision for the folks who are receiving these services. I just want to say thank you for the public discussions amongst all the folks involved here. This is an action item, so I do need a motion, if there's a motion for this.
All right, a motion, the acceptance of the recommendation for 4.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Zuli, roll call?
Supervisor Karen Spiegel,
Yes.
Dr. Ben Howdy,
Yes.
Dr. Matthew Ching,
Yes.
Dr. Charles Lee Johnson,
Yes.
Angelina Ko,
I recluse myself or abstain.
Carol Alba,
Yes.
Anise Smith,
Abstain.
Danielle Johnson,
Yes.
and Karen Roper.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes.
Thank you.
I didn't get to vote.
My apologies. Daryl Fry,
Abstain.
thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. We're moving on to item 4.2, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. I'm going to turn it over to Tanya.
Thank you, Board. Item number 2 is in regards to our Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. You may recall that our Continuum of Care received $7.4 million in federal funds aimed towards preventing and ending youth homelessness, and through our competitive process, we worked jointly with this board to fund 7 different agencies who are going to be working jointly with us to provide services to young adults between the ages of 18 to 24, beginning April 1st of this year. So again, these projects are set to begin April 1st, and because these agreements are part of a 2-year term, the assistance would run through March 31st, 2027. On the agenda, we provided a breakdown of all of the different projects, totaling $6.7 million. I will share that the difference, or dollars not included here, in large part are part of planning funds that are used to incentivize or essentially pay youth for their involvement. And these are youth who have lived experience and are part of our Youth Action Board, some of which are actually serving as interns in our office and are helping facilitate our Continuum of Care meetings and primarily our Youth Advisory Council. I mentioned earlier that item 4.1 and item 4.2 are tied because you'll see that one of the providers or agencies that was awarded funds included Transgender Health and Wellness. They received $433,453 to operate a youth drop-in center and really be one of 2 drop-in center sites for the entire county, so that any youth or provider who comes in contact with a youth could essentially navigate them to this site where they could be assessed for housing services and then be provided with the range of housing supports that are funded through this very same program. Because of the compliance issues referenced earlier in relation to transgender health and wellness, we staff are also making a recommendation that these funds be reallocated to the next qualified vendor. And given the sharp start date of April 1st, We are asking for delegated authority for our team to identify, select, and enter into a contract with a qualified vendor. What this would mean is that, given the approval from the board, our team would be working very, very closely to look at whether we can identify any alternate subrecipients or agencies that could carry out this program. And we would be providing the board with an update at our next Board of Governance meeting scheduled for, I believe it's April 17th, if I'm not mistaken. Zuli, I'll look to you for that. Yeah. Does that sound right? April 17th? For our next regular, yeah, April 17th from 9 to 11 in the city of Manning. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause and see if the board has any questions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you again, Tanya. Okay, just for clarification here, because I'm understanding that the issues that were discussed on the previous item are the same issues, and that's why this is being recommended here. Okay, but this is starting April 1st, so nothing has happened yet. Like, there hasn't been any reporting, there hasn't been any. So is the reason that this funding it's just kind of being bootstrapped pretty much to the other one, to the other funding because of the issues? Because since it hasn't started yet, I'm just wondering, yeah, thank you.
So you are correct. The decision that is before the board is tied to our experience in working with Transgender Health and Wellness as a vendor and their inability to meet contractual or obligations and deliverables spelled out in their contract. So this decision is being made as a result of all the different issues that were expressed in item 4.1.
Yes.
I had the same question, but to take it a step further, my only concern is they are two different types of services. And I realize that we want to look at the compliance issue as a vendor. But with that being said, when we have the drop-in centers for a specific clientele, we got to make sure there's the opportunity elsewhere. So I kind of hesitant on that of saying you screwed up in one area, we're not going to do any more. If there really is direct, because she was talking to HIPAA and stuff, and you didn't bring that up, but there wouldn't be the same situation in a drop-in center that HIPAA would have. So I kind of get a little confused on that.
Yeah. Just writing down the points, I can make sure I can speak to them. I will share that all of our HUD agreements, including the Continuum of Care program, which funded the first project, and then now the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, which is funding the drop-in center that we're talking about, have very similar requirements. So both projects require providers to enter client-level data in HMIS, or, as was mentioned earlier, for providers to use an alternate or equivalent system that would still allow HUD to have access to the information they need to measure performance and progress for a continuum of care. So the second is that some of the concerns that were mentioned previously in large part were due to billing costs or invoices that we received that were directly related to staff that were supporting client participants. And so although this program serves as or funds staff who are supporting a drop-in center, you can see how that same concern could easily transfer to this project. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Angela?
So I wanted to make sure I didn't, because I know Karen had her hand up before I did. this funding goes from April 1st till 2027, correct? So not that this is the recommendation I'm making, but to Karen's point, this is a totally different grant. And I know this scorecard would be extremely low, and that has been our go-to. Your scorecard is going to show how you're going to handle funding with a new project on other populations. So I can see where that would transition into this. However, based on the other funding sources, what's going on, putting it out to bid, finding another entity, would there be a feasibility to the start April 1st? You have a semi-contract or an amended contract that says you have this time and this time to show, to prove your track record, to improve your scorecard, to provide, these are the forms we need, this is the data we need, this is how to incorporate whatever system they're using. Because we had a separate system that was HIPAA based, and we still were able to migrate that data into our standalone system, which is what we mainly use to then comply with what HUD required. So there is a way to do that. It's just a lot of work and a lot of training with the personnel on the agency's side. We choose not to participate in HUD funding simply because of the capacity that we have. And we could easily do a grant, we could easily do that. We choose not to for other reasons. However, it is a lot of work, it's a huge undertaking, and I'm not saying, yeah, just give them the funding because they applied for it and it hasn't started yet. I don't want to set somebody up for failure. However, I also want to give somebody the opportunity to step up to the mark. And is that even something that would be feasible and considerable, since it's, I know how it is. I know we're going to come back and have a whole conversation in another meeting and talk about funding. But to Dr. Johnson's statement, we're here to support the little guy, to make sure the funding is diversified throughout the whole continuum. Is there a way to do that? Or am I just being,
Mr. Chair,
rose-colored glass, I guess, optimistic, just,
can I respond to Angelina? So
Yes.
it wasn't a lack of understanding, because we were very prescriptive in providing an alternative on how they could report. And they were given 3 separate instances in providing the information, how we prescribed it, and it would adhere to honoring the privacy of the clients, and they still did not provide it. So it wasn't that they didn't know how, they were unwilling to provide it.
So there was a resistance to
Correct.
the compliance, even while alternatives were put out
Correct.
there.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying that this is the solution. I'm just wanting to put all the cards on the table, because everybody talks about transparency and being fair. And we're here representing not only our agencies, but the people that voted us into these positions. And I don't take it lightly. And I work with them. I work with a lot of these agencies, and I know how hard it is to be a staff that's 12 people trying to support 150. I totally get it. We put in long hours, we blood, sweat, and tears. And it's hard when you oh, we got this funding and we're going to move forward, to then it be stripped away for whatever reason. We have to also take ownership of that as providers. But I'm just putting it out there. Is there a way? And it sounds like you've done way more than you needed to in good faith efforts. But again, I'm just putting it out there so that we make a informed decision.
Yeah, and while this is a separate grant agreement, it does still fall under the HUD COC umbrella. So it does fall under the same regulations, et cetera. There is some nuance, some enhanced allowable costs because of the population that's being served, but it does still fall under the same reporting requirements and requirements for record keeping, et cetera.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I would like to comment.
Somebody here on my left?
Just trying to, so, thanks, Tanya. So I understand, first of all, the requirements, a different program, different type of services, to some degree. Requirements are the same because they're HUD. So everything that the challenge, I understand the challenges in the prior program apply here. Well, I'm going to say, you mentioned that there were 2 groups that were selected for there are two different drop-ins throughout the county. Do you know, were there more than 2 people who applied? Were there only 2? Is this something that nobody does, this type of work?
So we had a total of 13 project proposals that were received for this grant application, and they could either apply to administer the Youth Drop-In Center, rapid rehousing services, transitional housing, or permanent supportive housing. We only received 2 applications for the drop-in centers, and those 2, right, one was awarded to Transgender Health and Wellness, and the other drop-in center was awarded to Silence Allowed. So then through this model, we essentially created I would say like a Western region drop-in center and then a Coachella Valley drop-in center. Obviously, if there were more resources, we would have funded multiple centers, recognizing, right, the vastness of our region. Right, that was certainly, I just want to emphasize the point, that was certainly a challenge we had. In regards to whether other drop-in centers exist, I will say that you could consider Operation Safe House, which is an agency that provides youth services and has both a site in Riverside and Thousand Palms as a drop-in center, right? A place essentially where youth who find themselves in crisis could go to. We also have the county-administered family resource centers that are throughout the county that also serve as central hubs. But essentially, I think all that to say that we recognize that there are other facilities that could potentially take on. I think about Walden Family Services, or Olive Crest, right, is one that has really grown a presence in the Coachella Valley. We also have the Tay Behavioral Health Centers throughout the region. So there are multiple sites throughout the county that I think we're very interested in exploring partnerships with to see if we could take advantage of the fact that they have their doors open 5 days a week, and are regular spaces that youth already visit and could be further advertised as a partner through this program to serve in this way.
And I guess, Tanya, I appreciate it. I think a couple things, like, it concerns me a bit that there's no one else applied,
Okay.
right? I don't know if for the sake of argument, none of the other places you mentioned couldn't pick it up for whatever reason. Would those funds be at risk to be given back, or whatever that would be? The counterpoint is, you go ahead, you continue with them, they do not well, like the prior project, and you put at risk the whole HUD piece. That's challenging. I agree with Supervisor Spiegel on the sort of I struggle a bit. I voted in agreement on the prior item, let me be clear. The pre-failing them in a bit of this project that they haven't started yet, I struggle with. I understand the thorough thought process that went into the conversation. Look, it's the exact same items that weren't done. I'm just trying to reconcile those pieces where you got one in western-ish region, you don't have anything over here necessarily. Yes, other sites could potentially pick it up, but no one else applied. And so I don't know what the best move forward is at this point.
Let me speak to that just a bit. There are 2 major things that I think came up, and I wish they were still here and had stayed for maybe some comment on this, because I think initially there was a concern for me too in seeing the recommendation. However, in public comment, one of the things that was shared was the statement, I was not willing to do something that a contract calls for. And when someone enters into a contract, in order to do business, you do business as the way in which business is set up. If we're not able to bill, not able to move forward, it jeopardizes everything. And so for me, that's more than a compliance issue. That is, I'm doing my own thing type of issue. And that puts everyone at jeopardy. That's thinking about about self and the mission of one, and not the collective mission that we're all about, which is why we're gathered here. That's one. Number 2, seriously concerned that there was a letter that went to clients. I think that was one of the things that was shared in the findings here, to tell clients that they're not going to continue to receive services. that they need to begin to look to another way. That's traumatizing to adults. I can't imagine something like that happening with young people, and this being a new funding area. This is another space that we're completely excited about because there hasn't been money in this space for youth homelessness to address it in this way. Large pocket of money, and I think that it's a smart recommendation to at least pause on moving forward with the vendor. Not saying that we'll never do business. You know, I think business can't, but something's got to be worked out where there's a willingness to abide by the way in which we do business so that everyone can be taken care of. I think those are two huge things, and that supports, while I get we need to figure out on who money goes to and that sort of thing, it still stands in the recommendation that I don't think this group is ready to go forward and to serve in this way. And I think those are just two big things that we have to sit on.
Thank you. Karen?
So I just, for the record, I know that the staff agonize over everything they possibly can to provide every bit of technical assistance and support. I know this is extremely difficult recommendation for staff, and I am inclined to support staff, knowing, because I know how hard they work, and you have to get so far down the road before they even get to the point where they're like their hand is forced to make a recommendation like this. But if it was the desire for most of this board, and I'm primarily asking Supervisor Spiegel and Dr. Chang your thoughts, if there's a direction, like what I want to say, an alternate motion to consider moving forward, since this is a new service, would the board be willing to consider delegating authority to staff to make a decision, as opposed to coming back again and relitigating all of this if they end up in the same situation? So I just wanted to throw that out there. If the board decided they didn't want to skip over because this is a new service, to think about an alternate motion to give staff the delegated authority and not have to come back. Although where I am, I'm inclined to support staff. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I wanted to invite Megan Gomez, our fiscal deputy director, to talk about an audit that we recently underwent. It was an internal audit, but just to share some of the findings, because that was one of the pieces that we didn't talk about, but in large part was also what influenced our decision with moving forward with this motion.
Thank you, Tanya. Good afternoon, board. My name is Megan Gomez. As Tanya mentioned, I'm HWS Deputy Director. I oversee all of our fiscal and admin functions. One of my roles is to oversee all of our audits that come to our department, which are many and diverse. And we're currently in the wrap-up phases of our biannual internal audit, which is conducted by the county's Auditor Controller's Office. And I myself am a certified internal auditor. That's where I started my journey here at the county with that office. So the purpose of an internal audit is to assess risk and review current internal controls and monitoring factors to make sure that risk is mitigated satisfactorily. And in this biannual audit of HWS, the audit team decided they wanted to look at grant compliance as one of the elements of risk for HWS. And to perform their audit procedures to determine if our grants were in compliance, they selected a sampling of our subrecipients, and they performed field testing to review client files and trace claims documentation back to the source files at their locations. Of the, I believe there were 4 subrecipients that were tested. Transgender health and wellness was one of them. And as I've been in communication with the audit team as they're preparing their draft report and wrapping up their findings and recommendations, the one item that is a concern to them is that they noted issues of non-compliance with transgender health and wellness regarding their documentation and their patient files in connection with our audit. Like I said, that audit report is still in the draft phases. We have not even received it yet, but it is currently being worked on by the ACO. I'm happy to answer any questions if you like.
I have sorry. How did everyone else do? The other three, as far as you know, were there any concerns? Or
No
issues?
concerns, no issues. They were all fine.
Any other board questions or comments?
I have to say, it goes back to the other statement that I made, much as I want to support. It goes back to, we got to be careful that we're not jeopardizing everything. And if, in fact, this was more of a overall on the audit and its behavior that it sounded when she did the first public comment, by the way, we usually, they talk on the item or they talk in public comment, but not both.
Right.
So we got to be careful, because she talked really long the first time. But in that, she made it clear she wouldn't follow our instructions. She made that very clear in her comments in the beginning. That's what now, as you said that, is concerning to me, that are we then going to risk other opportunities for other agencies if we're allowing repetitive behavior? Because she's made it very clear, we're not going to do this.
Correct.
So that is a little concerning.
I'll add a note that we don't know yet what the auditor's recommendations are going to be in response to what they found. We're still waiting for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd just like to add, I would be concerned if we granted them with this grant, given the history, given the comments that were made today, and given if we were to grant them this grant, would we go through another 6, 7, 8 months of issues and non-compliance? That's putting people at risk, putting programs at risk, putting us at risk. I just don't know that that would be the right move. So I'm sure that we are allowed to look at past history and decisions, right, going forward. So this doesn't appear to be out of protocol to look at the history to make decisions now. So any other board comments? And I just want to check in on protocol. Do we have public comment at this point? Or any public comment? No? Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion that we move to approve recommendation under 4.2.
I'll second it. Roll call?
Supervisor Karen Spiegel,
Yes.
Dr. Ben Howdigy,
Yes.
Dr. Matthew Chain,
Yes.
Daryl Fry,
Abstain.
Dr. Charles Lee Johnson,
Yes.
Angelina Ko,
Yes?
Carol Alba,
Yes.
Anise Smith,
Abstain.
Danielle Johnson,
Yes.
and Karen Roper.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4.3, Pathways to Home Launch. I'm going to pass it over to Emma, and there is no action needed. This is an informational presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Turn off your mics and sit back. Emma?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are exceptionally excited to provide this update to the board regarding our Pathways to Home launch. Just to give a little background, on September 9th, 2024, the Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions Continuum of Care team released a request for proposal for the HAP funding that created a pathway to permanent housing for 100 individuals. All awarded projects are expected to work collaboratively to provide a streamlined process that will assist individuals progress from unsheltered homelessness to emergency shelter, and then from there to permanent housing. Activities that are being funded under this funding are street outreach, operating subsidies for emergency shelters, rapid rehousing services, service coordination, and diversion services. This board approved $469,269 of HAP Round 3 COC funding, in addition to HAP Round 4 COC in $4,099,350, of which $440 were set aside for youth-specific activities to support emergency shelter and diversion services to supplement youth activities not covered under the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. I'm happy to report that the Riverside County Pathways to Home model supports the COC plan to build and strengthen its existing homeless response system through coordinated efforts with multiple systems and sectors which align under the County of Riverside Homeless Action Plan. These efforts are to invest in solutions to address the unique needs of homeless individuals living in encampments, to invest in programs that expand system coordination, housing resources, outreach, navigation, and supportive services. There was a flyer that was attached to the agenda which shows the 4 phases of the Pathways to Home project. Phase 1 includes the street outreach. So we have contracted with various street outreach teams that will engage directly with people who are literally homeless and refer them to our emergency shelter system. These street outreach teams will work with the individuals to connect them with housing navigation as well as to identify permanent housing solutions. Of course, this includes assisting with documents and also providing other supportive services. As I mentioned, we are providing funding to emergency shelters who will provide beds set aside specifically for these clients to fast track getting these clients off the streets and into emergency shelter. In addition to that, phase 3 will include rapid rehousing. So these clients will be referred to our coordinated entry system to be linked to permanent housing solutions. And then from rapid rehousing and also through the emergency shelter, placing those individuals into permanent supportive housing if needed. So we will be working very closely with our coordinated entry system in addition to all contracted partners. We did go to the board on November 14th and provided a list of awarded agencies. There is a pretty significant amount of agencies that were funded under these different buckets. I'm happy to share those agencies if you'd like. We also had a formula that was used to determine how much funding was allocated per district. So that information was also shared with the board at the November 14th meeting, and happy to provide that as well. And I'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions or comments from the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to next agenda item 4.4, reentry services. This is another informational item, and I'm going to pass it over to Karen Roper.
Thank you so much, board members. I wanted to take us a little walk down memory lane, focusing on this very important issue of re-entry and those that are justice involved, and how critical it is to make sure that we're focusing on important policies that impact system change so that folks that are discharged from jails or prisons don't end up back on the streets and homeless. And the whole initiative really started out in the continuum of care in our policy advocacy committee, and we have multiple working groups within that. You know, we have health, mental health care, we have youth, we have housing and legislation, community education, but there's also re-entry for justice involved. And in the beginning stages of the Policy Advocacy Committee, the re-entry group was diligently working to bring multiple public and private stakeholders together to talk about this very difficult issue. And it impacts folks that are justice involved, especially regarding jobs and housing. And I wanted to pause for a moment to give you an update on what's been happening to make sure that we keep this board engaged at the policy level, because it's so important. And I think it's, I'd like to take a moment to really just give kudos to Vanya, who's the head of Starting Over. They are our premier reentry organization, and there are other organizations across the continuum of care that are involved. But it was Vanya's leadership who she took the initiative to write a grant that funded our first regional conference on reentry. And those of us that were at the conference that day, it was amazing. Would you agree? I think there was somebody there speaking too, right? It was just absolutely phenomenal. And since that conference, it's taken a life of its own to be much larger than what it started to be in terms of the smaller focus at the working group. And I think we've made a commitment, I know I have as the chair, we're not gonna meet for the sake of meeting in policy advocacy or the working groups. And this is a testimony to where you support something that it can take a life of its own to become something much larger. And so I'm excited for you to hear what's been going on at that larger level. And before I turn it over, Anise and I were also, kind of worked together on a lot of this. I thought maybe you might want to say a couple words before we turn it over to Tamara. So.
Yeah, sure, just very briefly. And it's true that that conference that was held was absolutely amazing. There were so many people there, so much excitement. And I think a lot of the shifting of the narrative as far as it comes to individuals who are reentering and what services we can provide and should provide has, I think, always been a question, because oftentimes people who were reentering have been treated differently or overlooked. And so because of the conversations we've been having, the doors that have been opening, a lot of the work, it's starting over. I know I'm biased, but I know the amazing work that is happening at this organization, and I'm excited for Tamara to share with all of you. So thank you, Karen. Thank you all for your partnership and your allyship in this, and I'll hand it over to Tamara.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. Tamara Ruffin-Martin here. I'm not Vonia Quarles, but I am the assistant director at Starting Over. And a lot has happened since we first met and worked with Karen Roper and members of the Continuum of Care to put on that conference. First of all, Prop 36 passed, and Starting Over and our allies worked diligently to educate and let folks know what that would mean as it relates to reentry and incarceration. Cal Matters says about 30,000 folks will now be classified as felons because of the passage of Prop 36. Well, what does that mean to us, when we're looking at housing insecurity? Well, let's talk a little bit about numbers. If we look at what the CDCR reports, they report that it costs about $133,000 to house a person, right? Well, about $57,000 of those dollars are going for security. And then there's about $41,000 that goes towards health care. Well, health care would remain the same, but Starting Over, it costs us about $22,000 to house a person. And in their care with us, they also receive supportive services with Riverside University Health Systems Behavioral Health and other network of providers. They receive supportive services with their employment readiness programs. So it's just not employment placement, because if you've been traumatized and spent your life in the carceral system, it's gonna take a while for you to get your feet back, right? You need some support. So we really focus on the employment readiness system that helps a person not only get a job, but keep that job. And it's really difficult, because another statistic, and again, I mentioned I'm not really fond of those, but 90% of the men and women that are in the carceral system, they're coming home. They're coming home. And what we also understand is that 74% of the folks that are unhoused, they're carrying criminal convictions. So what does that mean? That means that we can't have a conversation about ending homelessness without talking about reentry. And we see that firsthand every day at Starting Over. I wear the hat of the employment project manager as well. And what I know to be true, it's difficult for folks to achieve gainful employment when they have 3 years parole requirement, 20 years. Young man told me today, I'm going to be on informal probation through 2096, 70 years, right? they've already paid their time and done so. They've paid their debt to society, but there's also the carceral system that's outside. And when you look at 74% of the folks that are unhoused being involved in the carceral system, then we really need to take a look at what we're doing. We're involved in a lot of things. We're housing first, right? So the health and wellness piece is very critical to our success. And most recently, we worked to eradicate some of the crime-free housing bills, and then in October, that bill was signed. So statewide, the folks can't be evicted because of their involvement with the justice system. But now we're seeing current challenges related to tenancy, right? Street tenancy is a problem. So people are being evicted on the streets where they're housed in front of your store or what have you. Just last week, we were contacted to participate in an outreach event, and while on site, one of the city supervisors informed us that the primary responsibility of the event or of their job was to provide folks citations, and you're familiar with those. And they were to leave within 24 hours. And then when we asked if they were giving vouchers or any other support, they said that they provided transportation. And they said they provided transportation to any place they want to go outside the city limits. So basically, we're displacing people from their city to yours without any collaborative efforts. And as trusted messengers, starting over, we were quite frustrated, and probably that's a nice word. We were frustrated that we were misled to the purpose of the event because we would never willingly participate. You know, our folks believe in us, and we've developed trust over 16 years. And because of the trust that we have, folks are getting help that they need. And I just want to say there are better solutions, right? So we did have a recent campaign where we were speaking to CEO Jeff Van Wagenen, and also at the time, Public Information Officer Dr. Leung, about converting unused public space in the Indio jails and other public spaces to cool and warm centers and to maybe day shelters. And we envisioned resources, activities, and showers and laundry facilities. And we had actually seen this model funded by the county in Mecca at one of the migrant centers. And we thought, why not? You know, these are beautiful facilities. The public are already coming to see their loved ones. Let's open up the bottom floor and help protect some of our folks and bring in the resources. We've got the manpower, they're there. Keep it safe, put in some showers, and we just thought that would be a great idea. We're still having those conversations. We also wanted to mention that, you know, the section housing voucher allocation for reentry providers would be great. Again, we're trusted messengers. And in our employment readiness, also, we're funded also by Housing Workforce Solutions and some of that, and also with private dollars. But we believe that having an allocation for reentry providers would also be helpful. And we welcome the fact that we have rapid rehousing funding. Now we have some in the city of Corona. And what we do is because the rapid rehousing, it actually removes some of the initial investment barriers that people have, like to get into housing, because even folks that don't have backgrounds have a difficult time finding a place to live, right? So we actually work with our participants and folks that we rapid rehouse to make sure they have good financial health and that they're able to maintain long-term housing before we give them the dollars. Also, it's critical, I mentioned the employment readiness piece, but many of our employment readiness grants also include the transitional housing component in them. And so that's important because, again, it's not just getting a job, it's being prepared to keep that job. And also, when you become recently released, you've got drug court, you've got mental health diversion, you're checking in with your PO, you're ordered to go through domestic violence training, anger management. Most folks can't hold a job during the first 90 days. It's impossible, right? So folks need that time frame to be able to stabilize and to get on good terms with their parole officer or probation officer so they can obtain gainful employment. And you know, they really don't obtain gainful employment right away. Because after years of being in the carceral system, we really need folks to get re-educated, Starting over is focusing on green jobs and working with local green job networks to understand what training we need to develop folks so that they can compete and be able to be self-sufficient, right? It's not just anything. And there's a misnomer. You think, oh, when people return home, they can become an apprentice. Our population is 40 to 50 years old. They've been incarcerated for most of their life. They're not going to be doing the physical labor that we envision that would make a good, sustainable living job for them. They're not going to do that, right? So we have to retool them to do some other jobs that can sustain them and keep them out of, safety net programs. It's important. What else do we like? We're also seeking investors and donors to establish the Rochelle McGee Community Land Trust. So community land trust, that's a really good solution because folks have an equity share. So this provides an opportunity for people to obtain permanent housing, have wraparound services. If you're not familiar with that model, usually it's like a 25% equity share for the person, and the trust keeps the 75% so that once a person leaves, the trust can also have someone else take over the space or take over the home. And we feel it's a good model to develop economic security. Somebody was here earlier from the Inland Equity CLT, and I know they're developing properties out in Adelanto for houses. But it could be single-family homes or multi-unit facilities. The idea is that a person obtains some equity and has an asset when they leave. And then lastly, to bring it back to the reentry conference, our March reentry conference was great, but since then we've grown exponentially. We've been meeting monthly, and we meet quarterly in person, and we're rotating where we meet. Last time it was in Coachella Valley. We're going to be in the high desert next time. We've got over 500 members, and then that represent about 300 organizations, and our work groups include funding and resources, policy and advocacy, public safety, and workforce development. So together, we believe that we can solve not only the reentry crisis or problems associated with reentry, but also eliminate homelessness for our population, which is 74% of the people that you're trying to serve. So won't you join us? I have a QR code. Want for you to take back to your organizations, to have a member of your staff join us. We have cities involved, and we would just appreciate your support. We need to do this together. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is announcements. And I will pass it over to Emma, upcoming funding opportunities.
Thank you. Very quick updates. So I'm happy to announce that our team is currently working on the 2024 ESG application, which is due on the 28th. Subsequent to that application will be our 2024 ESG RFP. While I don't have an exact date on posting, I did want everyone to know for situational awareness that that funding is going to be coming available, so that agencies keep an eye out. As usual, we will send out a notification to the COC through our listserv, and we'll also be sharing the information at our upcoming meetings. Additionally, I'd like to inform the board and all those in attendance that we currently have a bid open on our website. It is for the San Jacinto River Bottom Housing Technical Assistance and Consulting. That bid will be closing on April 10th at 1:30. The bid notification is posted on our website, and you can find the RFP on the county purchasing website. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office, and we'll be happy to point you in the correct direction. Additionally, we also have HAP 5 funding that will be coming to our county and COC, and that funding we are projecting to have the RFPs posted and available for agencies to respond in late fall, early winter of 2025. So again, that information will be made available with specific application deadlines and funding requirements to the COC through our listserv, and also will be shared at subsequent meetings. This is just for advance notice and awareness that those funding opportunities are going to be made available. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Next is agenda item 5.2, COC name change. Tanya?
So we wanted to announce that our division, which has been known as the Continuum of Care Division under our broader umbrella of under the Housing and Workforce Solutions name, will be renaming itself. And really this is being done to distinguish between the work that, of course, we love and do with the Riverside County Continuum of Care in partnership with all of you here, but also some of the work that is also done under funding that we receive to administer programs that are funded primarily through the county. We also serve as the local point of contact for the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, which again supports homeless efforts, but in large part is a program that we administer that also supports and prepares resources to support food and other housing resources. So all that to say that the new name that we will be utilizing is Office of Homeless Services. So you'll see that change in our signature line, and we wanted to make you guys aware so that you don't think that there's been a shift. It's all the same people, it's all the same team. So under our Office of Homeless Solutions, we will continue to support all the great work that's done through the Riverside County Continuum of Care, as well as any other county programs that we administer. And then I can jump over to the next item since it's also for me. Oh,
So,
sorry.
okay, I'm trying to visualize. So the continuum of care when they meet is going to be called the Office of Homeless Services?
Great question. So no, the Riverside County Continuum of Care will continue to maintain that name. All of our meetings will continue to flow under that title. It's just the division within our Housing and Workforce
Okay.
Solutions umbrella that
Just
will
wanted to clarify that.
refer to this name. Thank you. I know I can speak fast and sometimes it gets confusing. In regards to item 5.3, I wanted to announce that we have 4 board members whose terms are going to be expiring on June 30th of this year. As always, we greatly appreciate all of the time and commitment that each of our board members give to support our efforts to plan and end homelessness. And I wanted to recognize Lieutenant Hutchinson with the City of Palm Springs Police Department, in addition to Dr. Charles Lee Johnson, lead pastor for the Life Church, in addition to Linda Barak, who has been serving as an executive consultant. I have to confirm that with Martha's Village and Kitchen, if she's still under that role. And then Anise Smith, who is our formerly homeless representative. I have reached out to each of these individuals to inform them of their expiring term, and also to encourage them to reconsider running again. And so far, I have received a response from Lieutenant Hutchinson. I know he couldn't be here today. He might be with us electronically. And he indicated that he will not be rerunning, given that he has taken on a new assignment with the City of Palm Springs that is largely focused on a technology effort. And so I know Anise is here, so she can speak to her decision as well. But all this to say that we would encourage any of our board members whose terms are expiring to run, and then also, of course, to encourage any other individuals who are interested in nominating themselves, or if you would like to nominate someone else, that there will be a formal announcement that goes out to our Continuum of Care to identify nominees, and then once those nominees have been identified, we will send out a formal ballot where individuals or the Continuum of Care members can vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Next agenda item is call for agenda items for next meeting. Any suggestions for agenda items for next meeting? Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to recommend that we ask, and there is a representative here, the Inland Equity Community Land Trust to present, because we heard Tamara mention land trust, and there's a lot of talk about that, and they already have some developments happening in Adelanto, I believe. And so I think it would be good to hear that information and maybe see how that's something, because it is housing, and housing that can go for vulnerable communities. So some information we would want to learn about.
Thank you. Karen?
Just something for the board to consider, and I would ask staff maybe at some point, so that our services that we support with funding come alive in living color, that maybe at some point we could have a board meeting on site somewhere in our region where we've invested money. Obviously, a facility that could facilitate the size of the board and have the AV equipment. But boy, it's just so meaningful and beautiful to see it. And so I would just throw that out there.
Thank you. Any other suggestions?
I would think that we wouldn't have a site that's going to necessarily have the ability to have the communications, but we could do a field trip. So it would be focused on the field trip rather than on the meeting.
Good idea.
Get done before June.
Okay, the next meeting will be held on Thursday, April 17th from 9 to 11 a.m. in the City of Banning Council Chambers. And we are down to the adjournment. We will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 3:57 p.m. Thank you for joining us.